medical school? Do you need a
Well,
pediatrician?
usually it's a 4-year undergraduate program and a 4-year medical program. Sometimes you can get a combined 6-year program, but it's usually an 8-year stint in college.
Okay, and how much would that cost?
Well,
usually?
a low end would be about $25,000 for a typical college state school. A high-end college, private schools, today are as high as $55,000. So if you took that figure times 8, low end would be $200,000, and there typically many are paying double that. So it's not inexpensive to go to a college today and become a doctor. It's extremely expensive.
Can you speak about residency?
A residency usually in pediatrics takes approximately a 3-year program,
Okay.
which means you are getting paid, not enough to pay back any loans, enough to at least at that point afford an apartment and to become a resident.
And could you describe to us the certification process?
Well, after you finish your residency program, in practice, you will go and take an exam. And the exam is pretty extensive, but that's not the best part. You found out all the new pediatricians have to get recertified. And that's a process anywhere between 5 and 10 years, depending on if it's a person who practiced a long time. It's already been previously certified. For life, these guys are going to have a 10-year window to get recertified. That's what they're trying to do, to make everybody not be a lifelong certified doctor, but a continuous education with recertification. A lot of the doctors who are already in practice resent that because you're keeping up with medical education with proof to get your license renewed. Your institution reviews what you're doing, and your medical staff at the institution, your director of pediatrics, reviews what you're doing on a regular basis because he wants to keep everybody doing what we consider the best quality of care for every child that's taken care of by our institution.
And what are the costs of dues?
Dues are extremely expensive. On the medical side, it can run you $1,000. Some of the PX societies are about $750. You take all these different courses to keep your medical education up. Many of these courses can run in the thousands of dollars. So it's not an inexpensive process to get the education. Thank God the institution I'm at happens to have 2 to 3 lectures in the winter a week, which are certification lectures. You get 1 hour, sometimes a little bit longer CME credits, so you can get your numbers, which happen to be 50 every 2 years. And it's not a process that's simple, but you have to keep up because a good doctor is only as good as his knowledge.
And after all this money spent, how much do you make?
An average pediatrician makes slightly more than a principal. But if you take in the fact that you're not getting free health care, which is a big issue today, obviously, retirement funds, you're paying back loans, and if you have $200,000 worth of loans to pay back, you could be paying that back with interest, $10,000 to $15,000 a year, so you could easily be below $100,000, which is not a lot of money for someone putting in 12 years of education.
And how much would it cost for a solo practice in these hard economic
To open up a
times?
solo practice? Well, first of all, you just can't find a place to rent, which is not going to be cheap. You have to get a lot of different equipments in the office, different types of tables. You have to buy vaccines. An average pediatrician, I would assume, has an inventory of $50,000 to $100,000 worth of vaccines because you have to have it if you can't give it. So, I know you don't believe this, but when we vaccinate 1,000 kids fully, the cost to a pediatrician, if we buy all these vaccines, could be over $1 million wholesale.
Wow.
So here we're making the least of all specialty, but at the same time we have an outlay for vaccines that is huge, making it very difficult for anybody who gets out of a medical school, unless you come from a rich family, to be able to afford to open a medical practice.
And how much is malpractice?
Malpractice for a pediatrician, if you're lucky, you can get it around. I can talk only about New York. If you're part of a co-op thing like the hospital does and shares it with, you could be as low as 16. There are some guys paying high, maybe low 20,000. So it's not a small expense. And there's New York State, they're trying to raise it 15 to 20%. Now that won't knock pediatricians out of practice, but obstetricians, there's rumors that their malpractice could hit $225,000, and if they make $3,000 a delivery, that's 75 deliveries to pay their malpractice, probably another 50 deliveries to pay their overhead. That's 125 deliveries, and a lot of them aren't doing more than 100 deliveries a year. How do you afford to stay in business? So there's some issues that are going to have to be dealt with down the road.
How many hours does a typical pediatrician work?
Well, I only can talk for myself. I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most people don't call you at 9 o'clock at night with not important questions. So usually the calls you get off hour usually are important. Many doctors don't even take off-hour calls. They tell you to call at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't think that's a good idea. Or go to the ER first and then the ER doctor call. I won't think that's a good idea because I think a good pediatrician is an extension to a family. So they're going to call usually it's something major. Most pediatricians are working 40 to 80 hours in an office depending on what kind of a practice they have. So it's a lot of long hours. You also have to attend lectures in the hospital. You have to go to the hospital and you see babies, or you have a kid admitted. So the hours are extremely long. But if you ask most pediatricians, forgetting the money aspect, they didn't really go in for the money. They literally went into because they had a love of taking care of children. It's probably the only part of medicine where you can see a kid grow up almost like an extension to your family. And many of them come back and they see you several years after they're married, and they bring you their kids to them. So it's sort of like a nice place to be, not a nice place to make money.
So is that the main reason why you would want to become a pediatrician?
Well, you don't want to see bad things. You do see it, but you're like an extension to a lot of families. You're like a father or an uncle to a lot of children. So it's sort of like one of the nicest parts of medicine. You can make a big difference in a person's life. So it's sort of like a very special area. But because you care, and most of the pediatricians I know, I can't speak for all pediatricians, will find a way if a kid comes to them and they don't have money or they can't afford or the insurance is not quite in there. Most aren't going to turn your way. I mean, there are guys, you can hear stories all the time. So they're really like good, caring doctors, but they're not very good businessmen. That's the nature of good pediatricians. In fact, in my institution, we've had several kids with cancer where our hematologist did it for free. And we knew he was going to do it for free. He didn't say no. And the previous hematologist, it was never a question of what insurance you had. It was a question of what we can do. Because they also were bad businessmen. Now, we don't know that's true for all people who treat cancer, but my experience with two particular individuals has been that, and I'm very proud to say I know these people. So they're very good doctors, but bad businessmen. So maybe that's what a description of a pediatrician. Good doctor, bad businessman. Does that make sense?
Yes.